Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of Astro Chat. Today it is myself, Kimberly Williams. My co-hosts, Anne Sundell and Monica Anna, are away. They are both attending the Astrological Association conference over in England. And in fact, yesterday, Anne was presenting a workshop on karmic astrology. So I am hoping that those will be available for purchase soon. I'm looking forward to purchasing mine and hearing all the wonderful things she had to share. So I appreciate you taking the time to join myself, and be sure to check back in 2 weeks when the three of us will be together talking about the upcoming eclipse in Pisces. As always, if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit the notification bell so you can be reminded of when that chat is going to be happening. And if you enjoy this episode, give us a thumbs up, do the subscribe, all those good things. If you are listening to us on one of our podcast platforms and you're an audio listener, please take some time to go and rate or review us, whatever your platform offers. That not only helps our channel, but it helps other people find us as well. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's go in and talk about what we're looking at this week. We're going to be looking at the early part of September. We're looking at transits from the new moon, which will be at 11 degrees of Virgo, 4 minutes. Here in the States, in the Central Time Zone, that's going to be on September 2nd. And for Central Daylight Time, that's 8:56 p.m. Over across the pond, it'll be the following day on September 3rd at 2:56 a.m. in the morning if you're in England, 4:56 a.m. if you're over in Finland. And if you are watching us from another country or another time zone, feel free to convert that to what works for you. And we're looking at what is happening from September 2nd through September 17th, because the full moon, which will be our next episode, will be on September 17th. Again, here in the Central Time Zone, that'll be at 9:34 in the evening, and across the pond, it'll be in the morning on September 18th. And that one will be a partial lunar eclipse at 24 degrees of Pisces. So before we move into talking about these 2 weeks and what's happening, let's just pause for a minute and talk about eclipse season. So what exactly is eclipse season? If you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you've heard us talk about this before. And really, different astrologers have different opinions. I've heard a couple of definitions. The broadest definition I've heard is that because eclipses are not standalone events, right, you're going to have a minimum of 2 weeks apart on subsequent lunation. So if there's one on the new moon, there'll be one on the full moon, either preceding or following it. Sometimes we get more than 2, but at a minimum, there's going to be that pair of them. And so some astrologers will say that we could look at the energy from the month before, the month of, and the month after. I go with a slightly more narrow view, which for me, eclipses by definition mean that the node, the lunar nodes, one of those lunar nodes is under the beams of the sun. It is within 18 degrees of the sun. So for me, that's my definition. So with the eclipse we're having in the middle of September, I would be saying somewhere around September 10th or 11th, we're probably quote unquote in eclipse season. And then I've even read other people talk about they only consider the week of an eclipse, which for me is a little too narrow. So feel free to do some diving down the rabbit hole before our next episode and see what works for you. I'm sure that when the other girls are back, we're going to be talking about all of the lovely, exciting energy and definitions and different opinions about eclipses. All right, so we're looking at September 2nd to the 17th. And we're starting off with a Virgo new moon. As I mentioned, it'll be at 11 degrees of Virgo. And so let's just talk for a minute about what it means to have a new moon and to have that new moon be in Virgo. So, new moons in general are times where we can get very into our bodies. We can embody the energy of the sign that we're working with. In fact, that can be a great way to connect and get a deeper understanding of what that energy is about. New moons typically are also considered times of beginning. Some people like to begin things on a new moon, and other folks like to wait a few days until that new moon has become a crescent and we can see it, and that's their place of beginning. So, somewhere in between there is often considered a great time to start something new or start something up. These are also new moons times associated with healing, and they're associated with times of divination during the dark of the moon. The new moon, when we don't yet see that ring or that crescent, it's dark. There's that void where you're in our unconscious space. So these can be good times for doing any type of divination that suits you. And as always, a new moon has a lot to do with getting into our unconscious. So if we're having to get to the root of a matter, if we're trying to get past a block, if we're trying to see what we previously were not seeing with our conscious mind, we want to get into our unconscious mind through dreams or divination or journaling. Virgo energy is going to bring, how can I clear out my inner critic? So in terms of working with the unconscious, what's going on with that hidden perfectionism, self criticism that might be lingering in there, some of that self talk that's hiding in the back. In terms of divination, that is an earth sign, so this might be a great time to work with crystals or stones. The same with healing, doing some kind of healing with stones, laying those stones on you, doing a stone grid, something of that nature might call out to you. Beginning things and or embodying things, this is a very practical sign. This isn't about I'm just going to be spontaneous and go do something for the fun of it. Not to say that Virgos can't be spontaneous, but the sign itself is about practical. It's about being structured. It's about planning. So this is a great time to plan and structure and make time in your day planner, your calendar, maybe to start something about the body, something that feels like a structured program, whether that is physical exercise or going to the gym, or maybe it's something about moving the body, being embodied literally through yoga, tai chi, qigong. However you choose to work with it, I hope that this is an exciting time. And we'd love to hear in the comments, what do you decide to start up during this Virgo new moon? Now, Virgo is, as I mentioned, an earth sign, and earth signs are always going to bring an element of practicality to them. The earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and all of them like to be very practical. I had an instructor one time who told me all earth signs should be from Missouri, the show me state, because they all have an attitude of show me. The proof is in the pudding. I want to see it before I can believe it. It's easier to invest myself in something I can see, taste, touch, connect with on a very practical physicality kind of level. And they like to have a grounded approach, which is why I think earth signs tend to lean in to wanting to have planning, to wanting to have structure, to want to let's get it all on paper, let's get it scheduled out, let's see it before we start to engage in it. And earth signs also are the doers of the zodiac, I believe. These are the energy about if everything is about being practical and if life is about the proof is in the pudding, then don't give me words. Show me. Take some action. Even though action is very much a cardinal energy, cardinals take action about what is the most important thing to them. They take action in a different way, right? They're about starting up, the action of initiation and initiating. Earth signs take action too, but in a practical, grounded, structured, let's get this done kind of way. And it's mutable, like similar to some of our other mutable signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. It's going to share that element of mutability. Mutables like to change things up. Virgo especially likes to change for improvement. Let's review, let's analyze, let's look at what worked or didn't work, and let's think about how to change it next time so it'll be even better. Even better is a big buzz phrase, right? For all of us Virgos and our Virgo friends. There's also an energy here about being adaptable. If something is not working, Virgo is not going to be the sign that sticks with it no matter what. We're not going to be banging to get that round peg in a square hole. No, we're going to say, this isn't working. How do we adapt? How do we change? How do we do this in a way that's different so that things feel like they are moving in a very effective flow? We want to be productive when we're in mutable earth. There's this yearning for results. Setting a goal is great, but if I can't actually have those KPIs at the end to show myself that I got some of it done, it's hard to have that sense of joy of success. And some keywords that I think of as very Virgo: service, health, details, quality of life. What do I mean by that? Virgo is the sign of service. It is very much about, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? How can I make this world a better place than I found it? There's usually a drive to want to serve, help, assist. In fact, Virgo is often associated with a lot of professions and occupations, such as hospitality, such as the medical field, where it's all about, how can I serve you? And health is an overlap. I think that a lot of that is tied to, in modern astrology. You've probably heard about the ABC association, where planets and signs and houses are over connected, in my opinion, right? And so the sixth house is the house about our health. And in modern astrology, Virgo is very often associated with sixth house because it's the sixth sign. In a natural Aries wheel, that's where it would fall. And so I think this picks up a bit of that energy of health. But for me, it's also there because, as I mentioned, health and helping somebody improve their health is about being of service. And being detail oriented means I care about my physical body. It's an earth sign. I care about the health of this body. The idea that my body is a temple for my soul is very Virgoan to me. This idea of, how do I take care? How do I maintain? If I'm going to have a quality of life, and quality is so Virgo. In fact, I haven't read that anywhere. That was my very first teacher who felt for that, for him, that was essence of Virgo, and it really resonated with me. This idea of quality. I will pay a lot of money for something if it is of quality. I'm not paying a buck if it's something cheap. If I'm going to put my time and energy into something, I don't want to do a halfway decent job. I want what I produce, production, and producing is very Virgo. I want what I produce to be of quality, to have some meaning, to have some impact. And being detail oriented, wanting to have quality in this lifetime, means I have to take care of this vessel, this vehicle that gets me from point A to point B. And we often find that people with strong Virgo placements aren't just interested in traditional health and medicine. They may be, but there's also usually a strong vibe of, how can I improve my health? How can I adopt some of the alternative? How can I get back to basics? How can I work with herbalism or maybe meditation? Maybe I need to incorporate a little acupuncture, not as a leap away from, but as a blending. You'll find that it's those Virgo qualities where we start to look at all the different analysis of all the different ways that we can improve our health, and we want to do something complementary and blending. This idea of service, of being focused on health, be it mental health and or physical health, the details in life. Remember, God, goddess is in the details. And Gemini can also be detail oriented. They're both ruled by the same planet, Mercury. They're both mutable. But Gemini tends to be much more about asking questions and going down the rabbit holes and investigating. With Virgo, it's more like the difference between a hard science and an applied science. Virgo's the applied science. How can I use this information to be of use, to be of service, to be productive, to get things done? And so we're going to find that this Detail oriented with Virgo is really much more about discerning. In fact, discernment is a word that I read over and over people apply to Virgo, and I would agree with that. It's how do I break things down and figure out the bits, and what are the bits that make something work, and what are the bits that make it not work as effectively as it could? That's usually going on constantly in the Virgo mind. And of course, we can't move on without talking about some of the shadows, right? Each sign of the zodiac is an archetype, and every archetype has its shadow side. And with Virgo, the number one biggest shadow is going to be perfectionism, which can sometimes translate into criticism, self criticism, and fault finding. So I want you to just keep that in mind as we start talking about the energies of the new moon in Virgo chart, and just be aware that is there something going on involving the not being good enough tape that's looping around in our mind, and do your work to clear that out. Right. But first, as always, let's take a moment and talk about the Sabian symbol for this lunation. Right. Sabian symbols are really powerful. And since this moon is going to be at 11 of Virgo, we're going to go to the Sabian symbol for Virgo 12, which is a bride with her veil snatched away. A bride with her veil being snatched away. That brings up a lot of images for me. I think it's really beautiful and really intriguing. The first thing that hit me is, what does it mean to be unveiled? Whether it's willingly or not willingly, whether I lift my veil or it's being snatched away, what does it mean when we unveil, when we reveal, when we can see behind what was previously hidden, masked, or mysterious? And hiding in itself can bring up both a positive and a negative connotation. Are we hiding behind some pretense? Or is there something about my true self, my light, the light that is being hidden? And perhaps it's time for it to shine and to be revealed. The idea of a bride also is a symbol that I think brings up a couple of different layers. There's this thought that when somebody is a bride, they're literally stepping. It is a ceremony, an event that demarcates moving from one area of life, whether that is moving away from the family, moving away from being a child, or for an adult bride, moving out of this living as a single and stepping into a partnership. No matter what's happening, it is a major life change. So, does this indicate that for many of us, there will be some type of life change events, or the steps towards, or revealing that a life change is needed? Perhaps. It also, being a bride, indicates to me this idea of taking a vow. When we get married, we take a vow. Another way of thinking about a vow is making promises. So, what are the promises we need to make to ourselves or to others? What are the vows that we have taken, and do they still serve or not serve? This might be a time to reflect upon that. And there's something about maybe just this idea of stepping into a new identity. When something is unveiled, we take off that veil, we see ourselves for who we are. A bride is stepping out into the world and presenting herself as somebody new. She might be taking on the name of her partner. She may or may not be uh, changing her career path, right? Stepping into or out of domesticity. There's whatever's happening with those life changes, it forces us into a new identity. And just like a groom now is becoming a husband, a bride is now becoming a wife. And there's power in those labels and in those words. And there's often a lot of identity we can put into it. So stepping back from that and just thinking about this Sabian symbol of this lunation is indicating that these 2 weeks could be where we're really looking at what is the new identity I want to or I need to be stepping into. And of course, traditionally brides are associated with white, although I believe that is a rather modern tradition that goes back to the Victorian era. I'm not sure if it goes back further than that. I know Queen Victoria's made it quite fashionable in her day. But this idea of wearing white, it symbolizes purity for some people. And for a lot of people, this idea of a bride being pure and chaste and perhaps virgin. And that brings me to something I really want to talk about with Virgo is this idea of Virgo the virgin, Virgo and virginity. It goes back to a more ancient concept where it was really about sovereignty. right? Virgins, like the Vestal virgins of the ancient Roman era, they were women who were not defined or dependent upon any other man because in ancient societies, which were highly structured and highly patriarchal, in those societies, women by far and large did not have a lot of independence. You were somebody's daughter until you got married, and then you were somebody's wife until you had children, and then you were somebody's mother. And that was your cycle. And now we live in a world that's very different. But back then, that was the structure. However, there were very rare certain circumstances. There were certain goddesses who did not step into that cycle. They were virgin goddesses. There were certain women who could have a role like a Vestal virgin, right? They did not depend on somebody else, AKA another man, to define them or to support them. They were able to have sovereignty unto themselves. And I really love associating this idea of Virgo with sovereignty. And I feel like the Sabian symbol about I'm taking off the veil, I am revealing my true self, just for me, really encapsulates that. So, what is the sovereignty you are stepping into during these next 2 weeks? All right. That's enough of getting philosophical. Love talking about the Sabian symbols, and I wish Anna and Monica were here to give us their ideas. Hopefully, y'all, if you're listening, you will put your comments about this in our feed on YouTube channel so we can hear some other ideas of what this might mean. But for now, we're going to pull up the charts and look at some of the transits that are happening during this 2 week period. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull them up for you. We're going to have the new moon on September 2nd, but let's back up for a minute here and notice that the day before on September 1st, two exciting things are happening. One is that Pluto, who has been moving retrograde, is going to retrograde back into Capricorn. And this is our last time we're going to have a Pluto in Capricorn. If you've been following this journey, you know that Pluto has been retrograding in and out of Capricorn and Aquarius since last year. And this will be our last. It is at 29 degrees of Capricorn, which is the anaretic degree. It's pretty volatile. Often it feels the energy that is happening here can feel very much like when we are in school and we're getting ready to graduate. On the one hand, it's a chance to demonstrate all that we've learned. On another hand, it's a chance to see what have I yet to learn. So this could be that what have I not yet mastered? What have I not yet accepted? What have I not yet learned through this very long multi-decade transit of Pluto and Capricorn? And this could be our opportunity from now until November when it leaves and re-enters Aquarius. Good opportunity to learn that. And at the same day, we also are going to have Uranus station. It is stationing retrograde at 27 degrees of Taurus. And yes, they are in aspect, and we'll be talking about that in just a moment. But let's look at what else is happening this month. On the 2nd, of course, we have our new moon in Virgo, 11 degrees, 4 minutes of Virgo. And shortly thereafter, on the 4th of September, Mars is going to ingress into Cancer. Very important to pay attention to this because later in the year, especially November and December, we're going to have a Mars retrograde. And that retrograde will involve the mid to end degrees of Cancer and the early degrees of Leo. So start paying attention to that transit and see what you can predict or foreshadow. The week after our new moon, we're going to have the sun opposite Saturn. It will be exactly opposite. We're going to talk about this a bit as well because it's already an orb on that new moon, so we're already feeling those energies. And of course, since we are dealing with Virgo, we have got to look at Mercury. Mercury will be entering the sign of Virgo later in the month on the 11th. I'm sorry, on the 9th. And on the 11th, shortly thereafter, it's going to leave. It'll be early degrees of Virgo and it will leave the post shadow. In other words, it will be beyond all of those Virgo Leo degrees that we had the recent August retrograde in. If you are a person who's waiting on bated breath to feel released from our recent Mercury retrograde, put the 11th of September on your calendar for that. And then we have our full moon, which will be here in the States, the 17th, across the pond, the morning of the 18th. And that full moon is going to be at 24 degrees of Pisces. And as I mentioned, it will be a partial lunar eclipse. And we will be talking about that in depth in our next episode. All right, so let's unpack not only what some of that is about, but specifically for the chart of September 2nd, when we have that new moon, what are some of the lunar aspects that are happening? What is it that will be the front focus during those 2 weeks as we launch in there? Two of the things that stood out for me that I want to address and look at. One is that we're going to have a big T square happening between the sun and moon of that new moon at 11 Virgo. They will be opposing or opposite Saturn, and both of them will be making a square in the middle to Jupiter. Let's talk about that for a second. So we have the sun, the moon at 11 Virgo, and on the other side of the chart, you're going to have Saturn in Pisces, and both of them will be squaring that Jupiter in Gemini. And not only that, but just to add another layer to the mix, let's mention that the asteroid Chiron is currently making a nice little sextile to Jupiter, and it's putting it really close there. So it's adding that the wounded healer energy coming in to this very tense dynamic. The thing that stands out for me the most is the fact that we only recently had the exact square of Jupiter to Saturn. And now that square that is only just barely had a little bit of separation is it's still in orb, it's still squaring, it's now being added to, right? We now get the T square from the sun and the moon energy. It may bring up some of the energies that we had when that square was exact back last month in August. I believe it was August 19th. It may also tap into last month when Jupiter and Mars, because Mars has moved away and it's not really an orb to be part of this conversation, but it's not that far away. It's at 28 degrees of Gemini, not that far away from the 19 degrees of Gemini that we find that Jupiter. And so they were exact. Their contact was exact last month from August 10th to the 16th, right? Because as Mars is getting ready to retrograde in a few months, it's starting to slow down a little bit. So we may find that there's something about this energy that's taking us back. We're revisiting or reviewing, even though we're not dealing with retrogrades, we're dealing with energy we've dealt with before. What happened in August is now happening again or being tapped into in some way. And later in the month, in just about a week, on September 8th, as I mentioned in those slides, the sun is going to oppose Saturn exactly. And that just feels, again, this energy of what has been and what will be. We're examining it, we're looking at it right now. One of the things that occurs to me when we have a T square is it's like dealing with a three-legged table. We have Virgo energy, details, assessing, breaking things down, perfectionism, overdoing, fault finding, criticism, nothing is good enough. We have the Pisces energy of illusion, escapism, dreams, but dreams that lack any kind of tether to practicality, right? We can have the Gemini dysfunctions as well because it's a T square. I'm only looking at what are the hard, challenging sides of these signs. So then we have that Gemini energy, which Jupiter in Gemini, Jupiter wants to expand. So expanding this tension and also wanting to communicate, wanting to get the message out. And yet it can feel like the boot of Saturn is stepping on that Jupiter, our nose in life, the obstacles in life, everything in life that is stopping us, or the people in authority, whether that is real authority or the illusion they have authority, that are trying to block our path, trying to stop us, trying to inhibit our communication, or that inner criticism that is inhibiting that communication, right? This whole soup, this messy soup that's going on that is bubbling and brewing and fermenting and percolating, it's missing that fourth mutable sign of Sagittarius. And so instead of it being a wobbly three-legged table, if we develop some Sagittarius energy, if we choose to bring in what is it that I am working towards, instead of focusing on is this project in front of me or this dream or vision in front of me, this thing that I'm tackling, is it good enough and how am I going to get it to work? How about we take off the blinders and we look ahead? Look at the bigger picture. Why did I step into this? Why did I create this in the beginning? Is that a goal that is still worthy of me moving on? What are out of the box ideas? What are the things I can learn from people in foreign places, from mentors and teachers, from other cultures, from other ways of doing things that I can bring in to either help me turn my no's into yeses, to help me find alternatives that so I can be adaptable and move forward, like good Virgo energy, uh, so that I can find some peace or I can maybe forgive those missteps, like Pisces energy, so I can turn the no's into yeses, making that Jupiter and Saturn work with each other instead of against each other. It's this idea of the Sagittarius, the foreign energy, the other cultures, the what is beyond the horizon, and remembering it isn't just about the tension of what I'm dealing with right here and right now that matters. It's really what matters is how is that going to move me forward to getting beyond that horizon, to finding the next dream, goal, adventure. And since Chiron is in this mix, I would also say that perhaps this is a moment in which we need to consider what is the healing I need to bring in. Is the healing about the mentors, the father figures? I'm thinking of Saturn here. Mentors, father figures, society, teachers, patriarchy. Who is it that told me I wasn't good enough? And might need to heal those messages, whether that's what they said or it's just how we interpreted it, right? What about those Virgo messages that are going on in our mind? The criticism of ourselves and others, the fault finding, the wanting things to improve and never accepting that it's good enough. What about the Jupiterian energy of taking our Gemini minds and running amok with them? Maybe it's the can I just accept that I'm working on a presentation and it's not the book that I want to write in 5 years' time? Can I pull myself back and see where I am versus where I want to be and see how they're connected, but not make a mountain out of a molehill, not try to turn everything into it must be huge and large and it must be overwhelmingly fabulous. How about good is good enough? How about my best is perfectly fine? So, what is it we need? What is perhaps, I'm thinking of Sagittarius here, what is the spiritual teaching? What is the mantra? What is the saying or the quote? What is the go on Pinterest and find that one little thing that if I have it posted and I read it, it stops the loops in our mind that are keeping us stuck and it allows us to step out, see the bigger picture, have more positivity, embrace optimism, and move forward. The other thing that really jumped off the page for me is the fact that we have a couple things happening with the moon. The new moon is on the 2nd, but just 2 days later on the 4th, the moon is still going to be in Virgo. It's moving to the late degrees of Virgo. And when that happens, it'll do two things. One, it creates a T square of its own, not with these same planets, not with the sun, moon, Jupiter, and Saturn, but now we're going to be looking at planets that are at the tail end of Gemini, like Mars, at the tail end of Pisces, like Neptune. And so we will have a T square in the mutables. Again, not involving Sagittarius, but now those later degrees. So we're bringing in this idea of Mars. I want to take action. I want to do it now. I have ideas in my head, Mars and Gemini. I have ideas. I have things I need to say, and I need to get them out now. I have things I am thinking about. I need to be working on them now. And then again, we have Neptune and Pisces, but now it's Neptune. I just can't seem to focus. My mind is going on too many tracks. I'm in a dream state. I'm visioning, and it's really hard for me to be practical and productive in any kind of Virgo way. And so we may be feeling criticized by others for not being grounded. We may be criticizing ourselves for that. So we've got this like interesting energy that we start off on the new moon. Boom, let's revisit this square of Saturn and Jupiter, the yes and the no, the gas and the brake pedal, as I often think of them. And then within 2 days, boom, let's now look at this T square involving action of Mars and the dissolution energy of Pisces and all that can bring. I think this can create a whole lot of tension. Obviously, T squares are tension, but we have these two back to back. And because I think we are in the same signs, but jumping, going from these three planets, it can bring up really more of a need for that Sagittarius energy. But moving away from all the heavy stuff, we also have something really positive, which is that simultaneously on the 4th, as the moon is in those late degrees of Virgo and getting ready to leave Virgo to ingress into the next sign, she also makes a grand trine. Grand trine, now we're going to be dealing with that Pluto and that Uranus that we mentioned earlier. Pluto and Uranus, Pluto, as I mentioned, is going back into Capricorn for its last journey through that sign. Pluto and Capricorn, for a lot of us, has been structure, has been feeling disempowered by the structures or overwhelmed. Workaholism in overdrive, trying to be successful, trying to achieve, trying to get the labels, recognizing I didn't want those labels, shedding the labels. So whether we're climbing the mountain or we get to the top and feel dissatisfied, and now we're coming down the mountain, whether we're shaking that mountain off or we're looking to the mountains ahead. And what is the next mountain range I want to climb? Wherever you are at with this Pluto and Capricorn journey that we've been in for just over 20 years, right? This is that moment, I think, of really asking ourselves, how do I truly define success? What is stopping me from reaching the success that I desire, that I yearn for? Where have I given some of my power away, right? Pluto, where have I given power away? What are the fears? What is the dread? Fear of failure, fear of success, even. What are the things happening there? This is that chance to really get to the nuts and bolts of it. And it's making this nice trine with Uranus, which means it's time to break free, breaking out of the bonds, the fears, the chains that have held me back. Perhaps breaking free from the responsibilities and the duties. So many of us have things we do for others, on behalf of others, that take up time, that take up energy, that take up money, and don't therefore allow us the freedom to do the things we want for ourselves. And with Uranus being in Taurus, as we've mentioned so many times on this episode, because this has been going on since what, 2018? So there's this practical earthiness of Taurus. There's this yearning for change that is Uranus, and yet Taurus doesn't usually want to embrace change until it's my idea. And I want to move. I want change to happen at a very slow, gentle, measured pace, not suddenly out of left field like Uranus can sometimes do. And we're going to see these two planets, that trine between them will perfect, but not this year. Right? This is a 2025, 2026 experience. But right now, as one is stationing and one in its retrograde is going back into that prior sign, they're going to be within 2 degrees of each other. The closest connection they have this year is happening now. This these two planets about evolving, one about change and freedom and authenticity, and the other about reclaiming your power and all the fears we have around doing that. They're working in harmony and with this flow. And on the 4th of September, as the moon enters the tail end of Virgo, boom, we have an exact grand trine because now we're bringing that Virgoan energy in. And this could be that moment where you get the flash of insight, which is very Uranian, about what are the steps that are going to lead me to empowerment and success, that Pluto and Capricorn, that flash of insight about what is it that is holding me back from my most successful, radiant, glorious self. This can also be that moment when we have that flash of the download of heavy criticism or fault finding or perfectionism the I am not blank enough moment. And suddenly it's like, I see it. I suddenly see the messages I've been repeating to myself or the messages I'm hearing from somebody else. I'm getting the impression that with this new moon and the days following it, it's the realization of what has been going on and causing the tension in our lives, and suddenly seeing whether we are our own worst enemy, whether there is someone or something in the outer world that has been creating a repetitive stop. It's almost like that drip that is happening into the rock. And finally, we have that last drip after many millennia of ages. It finally finds its way through. We have that opening. We get to see a lot of folks talk about hagstones, which are stones that over time from water, they've developed a hole in the middle. And so you have the stone, but you can see right through it. This is that moment of we see through the earth, right? We see with clarity what we need to do in order to move forward. So I'm personally looking forward to this energy in the hopes that this grand trine that the moon creates will in some ways complement or soften the T square that it simultaneously is creating between these mutable signs. All right, so there's two other things of important note. One is we can't have a new moon in Virgo episode without talking about Mercury. Mercury, the planetary ruler of Virgo. Mercury's not extremely active in this chart, but let's just take a moment to note it's still in its post shadow. We had the Mercury retrograde last month. And until, even though Mercury has gone direct, until it is in direct motion long enough to get past the degree of sign where that retrograde began, we're not completely out of the woods, right? It's over, but it's still lingering there. We still may be having some aftershocks of Mercury retrograde kind of moments. But once we get past September 11th, we are out. But until then, we're still in this looking over our shoulder kind of energy. The other thing is there's a lovely trine between Mercury and Chiron. Chiron is currently in Aries and at 22 degrees of Aries. And so it's making a lovely fire trine to that Mercury. The fire is getting rekindled and it's getting started up. And there's something here again about how am I bringing healing? And I think that the healing energy with this transit of Chiron and Aries that we've been dealing with for some time now, I think a lot of this is about what has stopped me from making life about myself. What has stopped me from being the star, the center stage of my own life? And so here's an opportunity for our mind, Mercury, to connect. As we look over our shoulder, as we're looking at perhaps what was the energy of August about, what were the lessons that maybe didn't make sense in the moment, perhaps we didn't see them in the moment, but now that it's in the rearview mirror and I'm looking over, I can start to reflect and understand and find some healing about how do I think about myself and how do I communicate about myself. And lastly, we're also going to see that just shortly after, about the week after this new moon happens, somewhere around the 7th of September, Mercury will be making a square, an exact square to Uranus. That Uranus that's making a lovely trine with the Earth sign planets of Pluto and the transiting moon. It's also going to be making the square in the fixed signs. Uranus at 27 Taurus to Mercury, which will by then be at 27 of Leo. This could be saying that this is a time where we're still in post shadow. Whatever happened last month, this might be where we suddenly need to speak about it or to rage about it or to vent about it. This could also be a time where we suddenly feel the need to take action. If it's not about what has happened, Uranus being very forward focused planet, this could be I need to take action now. I'm tired of waiting. It needs to happen. And that may feel like we're having to push. We're having to push the Taurus boulder that's in inertia on the mountainside. We're having to push with all of our might to get that ball rolling, to get it rolling down the mountain. And that push is going to require our Mercury in Leo energy. It's going to require some passion. It's going to require that we communicate our passion. This could require that I need to change the parts of me that I keep hidden. Remember that Sabian symbol of what is hidden behind the veil? It's time to lift that veil, or life is going to come snatch it away unexpectedly. This could be that moment where if we do not lift the veil and reveal our passion, our excitement, our joy, our Leo, living life creatively from our heart, this could be the moment where the life decides, or the universe, or others snatch that veil and we are exposed one way or another. It's time. It's time for this to happen. So it'll be interesting to see what does that bring up for you and for me as we move into this month. And then the last thing of note is Venus. Lovely Venus is conjunct the nodal axis. She is going to start off this month on our new moon at 5 degrees of Libra, right next to the south node, which will be at 6 degrees of Libra, and of course, opposite the north node, which will be exactly opposite. So Venus in Libra is wonderful, right? She is the planetary ruler of the sign. She's very comfortable. She's at home. She's in dignity here. This is a time in which relationships may figure prominently. This new moon energy is bringing up what is it we need in relationships? What is it we desire? What is it we offer? What is it we give? And being on the south node, this could be saying what relationships have come to their natural state of conclusion, and what relationships do we still have things to learn from? Because the energy of the South Node is twofold. On the one hand, it can be our comfort zone, it can be what is known territory, and comfort zone can hold us back from stepping out, from stepping into something new and different. And at the same time, things that are comfort zone didn't necessarily start off that way. They became that way because we spent time and energy and effort and invested ourselves in making them work. Relationships that have become supportive, that have become comfortable, that didn't necessarily happen overnight. It was because of the work that we and our partners have done to get there. What have we learned? What are the strengths? What are the skills? Right? What are the abilities that we used to get to this place? Because we want to keep those. So often people will talk about the South Node as a place of what we need to shed. There is a certain energy about the South Node is the past. And if we stay in the past, we're not moving forward. So something about it needs to shift. I would say shift rather than shed. Something needs to shift. We need to step into our North Node. We need to step into what is outside our comfort zone and what is moving us forward and what is a little scary and what feels a little alien, right? If we're on a path of growth. Yet, I may need those skills that I have developed and mastered in order to continue to move forward, right? I might need some of that comfort as a form of coping with what feels like discomfort. So, this is not necessarily saying every relationship in our life, it's time to throw it out the window. It's, I believe, saying it's time to look at what are the relationships in my life that need to shift. And am I willing to do that work? And is the other person willing to do that work? By the same token, not only is Venus on the South Node, she's opposite the North Node. Where do I need to be headed? And the North Node is in Aries. This to me says it is really a fabulous time. These 2 weeks is a time in which we can meet the people who are going to be the relationships that help us move forward in the days and the months and the year ahead. This could be the time when we plant those seeds about forming new friendships, forming new romances, forming new energies, forming new coworkers, getting new bosses, developing new mentor mentee relationships, right? Venus rules in Libra is about all relationships, not just the romantic ones. So take a look at your chart, see where your Libra energy is, what house is that, and where will this Venus nodal axis energy be opening you up to what I need to shift about relationships that exist or have existed. Maybe it's time to review old relationships that I've already released, but what can I go back and learn from them? And what does that tell me about the Aries energy of relationships it's time for me to step into? So that's a lot for us to look at and ponder and reflect upon as we move into the next 2-week period. As we part, I'm going to share with you, I don't really have a tip or trick. I do have, I guess it's a trick, it's a question, it's a reflection that I will be spending some time with, and I would like to share it with you if it works for you. My big question for myself right now: what is it in my life that needs to be unveiled? And with that, I'm wondering, how would more Saturn energy, how would less Saturnian energy improve my quality of life? So, using that Virgo discernment from that new moon and how it's applying oppositional tension energy there, just thinking about what is it I need to unveil and how will more or less of that Saturnian energy help me in that unveiling or improving the quality of my life. I'd be curious to hear if this is something you reflect on, and if so, what do you come up with? Also, what are the transits that you are watching? We love to know. Obviously, there isn't time for us to talk about every single transit happening over the next 2 weeks in the course of one episode. So, is there something specific that you are following in your chart or in the sky? Feel free to hop onto YouTube, put your comments in your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. In the meantime, have a wonderful 2 weeks, and we will see you back here when it's time to talk about the upcoming Pisces eclipse. Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.